Hi, I'm Aaron Lopresti. I've been a comic book artist, commercial illustrator, and writer for over 25 years, and this is my YouTube channel. "10 years ago, I launched a creator-owned book through DC Comics called Garbage Man. I now have the rights back to the character and will be collecting all 120 pages of the DC material with new pages along with a brand new story in one big hardcover collection. This will be a crowdfunding campaign that I will be launching this fall. In this first YouTube episode, I will break down the first page of the script for the new Garbage Man story into a detailed thumbnail layout. So you're getting an exclusive look at the initial stage of creating the first page to the new Garbage Man story. Okay, what we're looking at here is the first page to the script of the brand new Garbage Man story that will be included in my collection that we're putting out here soon via crowdfunding. I want to break down the script with you first and then go and show how I lay the page out in a thumbnail fashion. This doesn't have all the details that a finished script that someone else might have written for me would have, because obviously I wrote it for myself. I know I'm going to draw it, so I have a lot of stuff in my mind already of how I want it to look, so I didn't feel it necessary to put all that on the printed page. But let's quickly go over the script here before I start drawing. This is page 1, obviously. Panel 1, Garbage Man in the woods near the railroad tracks. I think the Reverend is right. Getting away from the city, even for a few hours, does help. Okay, so that gives us our dialogue, maybe what he's thinking a little bit. That's going to help us figure out body language and so forth in that first panel. Second panel, we have a closer shot on Garbage Man. We're going to move the camera in a little bit. The first shot is basically an establishing shot, so the second one's going to be closer, give us a little more detail. Garbage Man says, "Coming to terms with what I've become, what I am, might require some solitude and self-reflection. Finding a purpose might be a good start." Okay, then we cut to 3. Now this is going to be a panel 3. Now this is going to be a close-up on Garbage Man as he looks off panel with a look of annoyance because he hears a sound effect, twig breaking, something like that. And so he reacts to that and says, "You've got to be kidding. Who could be out here this time of..." And before he can finish the sentence, we cut to the big panel, the reveal panel that has the shot of the zombie coming down the hill that obviously takes him by surprise. So those are our 4 panels that we're going to break down now in thumbnail form, so I have an idea of exactly what I'm going to draw on the final page before I get to the final page. Okay, what we're going to do now is called a thumbnail. This is an 8.5 by 11 piece of 20-pound copy paper, so pretty standard stuff you can pick up at Office Depot or whatever, and I'm just using my... I don't usually use a pencil like this, but this has a darker lead, so it's going to show up better on the camera, so that's why we're using it. But anyway, we're going to break down and do a thumbnail layout for page 1 of this Garbage Man story, Night of the Living Jed. And so it gives me a pretty concise idea of what I want to draw before I start on the final page, or the finished artwork for the final page. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of block in about the proportions of the comic book page. Now, these are roughly 10 by 15 inches in actual size. The live art area that varies a little bit depending on the paper. But I've come to, over years of doing this, sort of can eyeball a pretty good ratio here, size ratio for it. So, okay, so our first panel, if you recall, was Garbage Man was out in the woods near the railroad tracks. I've decided to dump the railroad tracks because I don't think we really need them. So I'm going to start an establishing shot here. We'll put some trees in the foreground here, some pine trees, because he's out in this isn't the jungle, it's just kind of a Oregon forest, if you will, even though he's not in Oregon, he's somewhere back east, but pine trees and that type of thing. So I always like to put a big foreground element in here, kind of to frame the focus, which is going to be the character here in the background. And we'll indicate a little bit of a hill here, and maybe more of a windy gnarly Wrightson-ish Frazetta kind of tree back here growing in the ground. And then we'll have Garbage Man, say, right here sitting, sort of, maybe with his, holding up his head a little bit with his other hand, as he's kind of sort of contemplating the meaning of his life now that he's been changed into this monster. Okay, so here's Garbage Man sitting there. Maybe I'll put another tree in the foreground here, not quite as thick as this one. And then we'll start, indicate some trees back here. Maybe some leafy trees mixed in with the pine trees. Some bushes, whatever. And I'm really this is very loose. I'm just trying to get an indication of what I want to draw. I don't have to draw all the leaves and all the trees and everything. I'm just kind of, some of this I'm doing for your benefit. At this point, I would have abandoned this panel and said, okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to put trees back here and all that kind of stuff. But so there's that, and maybe there'll be some shadows of trees across the ground here or something. We'll figure that out when we get to that point. But anyway, so basically we framed him in here with these trees, using foreground trees as framing devices. So we've set Garbage Man up out in the woods, sitting on a gnarly old log, kind of contemplating his life, right? Okay, so that's our first panel. We have to remember that we're going to have a big reveal panel, which is panel number 4, as the last panel on the page. So I don't want these lead-in panels to take up too much space on the page, because I want to save it all for that big reveal. So our second and third panel, we're going to cut about right here, I think. And that'll give me all this space here for my big reveal panel. Okay, in our second panel, if you recall the script, we're going to move in closer on Garbage Man. He's not contemplating anything. He's not contemplating anything much different than he was in the first panel. We're just moving in closer so we get a better shot of him. And then in the third panel, which is going to be over here, we're going to have a close-up of him reacting to the sound effect he hears, right? So what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to work the sound effect in here. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I sort of need to do this because I'm going to use the sound effect as a panel break. Okay, in my little attempt to be clever. So, and I am going to work in on the final art. I will work in the actual lettering myself. Because even though we're not lettering on the boards like we used to do in the old-fashioned days, that means putting the balloons and everything on the actual artwork. That's all done digitally now. But what I did with Garbage Man originally, when I was doing this series for DC, was I did all the sound effects as part of the art. So at least you kind of got an old-fashioned feel to it a little bit, with the sound effects actually being part of the art, which can be a really cool thing. So I'm using an old Wolverine sound effect here for our breaking twigs sound effect. Okay, so this sound effect is going to separate these two panels, right? So this is going to be 2, and this is going to be 3. So 2, we're going to move in closer, and I've got dialogue. He's got a couple lines of dialogue here, so I want to make sure I've got space over here to fit those balloons, right? So we're moving in on Garbage Man. And it may actually be the exact same shot as this, or position, excuse me. Angle's slightly different, but he's in the same body position because nothing's, about a second has gone by in real time from the first panel to the second panel as he's continuing, his word balloons will be up here, and then he's going to be continuing that same thought down here into 2 other word balloons, right? So again, I'm not going to put in a lot of detail. As long as I know the figure, what the figure position is going to be, that's good enough. Okay, and of course there's going to be maybe a hint of the log he's sitting on, and I might have some, I'll have to fill in some foliage and stuff back there. Okay, so we go from a smaller establishing shot to a bigger secondary shot, and then we're going to go in for the close-up right here. And again, I have to be mindful of exactly when I actually draw the finished page, which we will discuss when I get there, but I have to remember that I got word balloons in here. So it's like, where am I going to put those word balloons so that I don't cover up important parts of Garbage Man? So anyway, we're going to go here and do this. And this is his, I believe the line was, "You got to be kidding me. Who's out here, this time of night," right? So he's reacting to that. He hears the sound effect, maybe a couple motion lines there. That's kind of old-fashioned too, to put motion lines in. A lot of people don't do that anymore, but I still kind of do, because I kind of like my comic book art to look like comic book art, but that's just me. Okay, so he's reacting, right? So we have panel 1, 2, sound effect, third panel. Now the big reveal. What I want to have here is a zombie coming down over the hill towards Garbage Man. So I think in the foreground what I'd like to do is indicate some of Garbage Man here, like part of his head. And the reason for this is because if you just go with the splash of the zombie, which we'll indicate in a moment, you don't really know where Garbage Man is in relation to this creature. And good storytelling, you always want to know what your spatial relationship between your characters is. In other words, where are they in relation to each other on the page? That's the quickest way to lose a reader, is not by not establishing that. Okay, so by putting him here in the foreground, we know here he's turned to look to what would be his right. So now we're over his left shoulder looking to see what he's seeing. We still indicate him here. We know he's here. We know where he's at. We've established all that. And so now we can see where this zombie is in relation to Garbage Man, right? So we have this zombie coming down the hill. I'm going to make him sort of knock-kneed and awkward, like any good Wrightson student would do. Hands hanging down at his side. Maybe this leg coming in like this. So we want him to look, that's not a particularly good drawing, is it? I'm going to get some awkwardness in this. I'm going to put him in overalls, which makes sense in the story, but obviously I'm not going to blow the story for you here. You got to get the book to see how it turns out. Okay, so he's walking down the hill. And I have a pretty good idea of what position I want him in. Of course, this could change a little bit once we get to the finished stages. I'll put a little zombie face in here just for fun. And he's not totally decayed, so he's going to have a little bit of hair and some ears maybe. But he's definitely, and these clothes are going to be more tattered than probably what I'm indicating here. All right, so he's walking down the hill, right? Maybe I'll put a little farmer's hat on him later, I don't know. But we're going to do the same thing now with this as we did up here with some foreground elements, because I want to get this kind of creepy tree look or whatever going on in here, that he's maybe walking down the hill a little bit here. And obviously we're going to have some trees up on the hill that he's coming over. Some rocks and bushes and that type of thing here. Maybe another tree over here in the background. I want all these trees like leaning and swirling around, so it's kind of a gnarly looking forest. Okay, one thing I always have done on my Garbage Man stories is I've always indicated the title. I've worked in the title much like Eisner or Stranko would do. Let's see, maybe I'll put the moon back here. We'll see how that actually ends up. Trees. But I've always worked the story title in on the title page. So again, that will be part of the art. So I want to figure out how can I work the title into this artwork. Well, my idea was, as he's coming down the hill here, we could make the letters out of rocks and twigs and things like that, so it kind of spells out the title on the slope that he's walking down. Now we know the title of the story is Night of, now I'm going to have to adjust that obviously, of Night of the Living Jed. Okay, so what we're going to do is when this actually gets to the final pencils, these are going to be maybe, you know, rocks or something, and I'm going to have to position this lettering better so that you can actually read it. Like I might go in and erase, well, let's just do it here for the sake of argument. I'm going to say, okay, that tree is taking up too much room, so I'll move it over here. Now I can start my N here, right? So then if we see most of that T, either all that T or most of that T, we have a pretty good idea that it says night, right? And I might be able to move my of over here just a little bit. Night of. Okay. And again, this is all going to be in perspective when I actually do it, you know, so there'll be perspective lines here as he's coming down this hill. So these will be more in perspective. I'll try and get this in here a little bit better in perspective so you can see. But again, this is a layout or a thumbnail. It's not really, I'm not even attempting to do finished art here. I'm just trying to give myself a guide moving forward. I'm still going to have to squeeze that. I might scooch his head over a little bit. I might have to make these letters smaller. Night of the Living. So you'll see when we actually get to laying the page out on the finished artwork, this is going to take a little bit more planning than what we're doing here. Okay, and again, these are all going to be rocks, and there'll be, you know, crags and stuff. So it'll look cool. It'll look like the lettering will be carved into the side of the hill, or it'll be part of organically growing in the hill. So it should actually be really cool when we get it done. But anyway, there you have it. The thumbnail layout for the first page to our new Garbage Man story that'll be titled Night of the Living Jed. So it's a basic, just a pencil rough, break down the action so you know what angles you're drawing stuff from, how close, how far away, what the whole layout's going to look like before you start attacking your finished artboard and making mistakes on there, which I will anyway, but at least hopefully after doing this I won't make as many.